All right, awesome. So, welcoming everybody here on Friday. A very spring-like day here, and Jeff, I'm in Ocean City, Maryland. So, got a little festival going on down here. But spring is in the air here in Maryland. Coming off of a nice little NFL draft. Before we get into kind of the Terps, I want to get your thoughts on how you thought your Commanders did last night and what you're looking forward to, and also thank you for joining us. Oh, I guess he got logged off. Yeah, we're having a few technical difficulties right now, but Jeff is getting on, so we're just going to talk some Terps hoops, Terps football. Jeff's one of the best in the biz here with discussing everything. So, really excited to have him on. Going to Portal. He's also a big Commanders fan, so going to kind of get his thoughts on the Commanders draft and stuff like that. So he is logging on, getting some laptops, but you know great day in or great week to be a Terp. Great couple weeks actually with the portal and everything like that. So really, really excited for what this team has to offer going forward. And I know Jeff's going to let us in on some great insight, um, with everything. So I'm seeing the number three ranked overall class between incoming freshmen and Maryland and transfer portal people, which I didn't think Buzz had it in him. He didn't seem like a guy that I thought would hit the portal that hard, and he did. But we'll have to see if it all comes together, and hopefully it does. you know, um, but we'll see. So here we go.
I think I'm good to go. Sorry about that, Marco.
You are all good, all good. Well, I was kind of just talking to myself here. I didn't want any kind of side, but welcome in Jeff Ermann. I mean, one of the best in the business with covering everything that is Maryland. And Jeff, what are you on month number? Is it 1 month of being a grandfather? How's everything going with the?
Yeah, about a month. Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's amazing. It feels a little strange because I think we all feel still like a little bit like a kid inside. So I'm not sure how I'm a grandfather, but yeah, it's amazing. It's been an amazing addition to our family.
That's awesome. Well, I have no kids myself, so it's very unlikely that I'll be a grandfather, but I do hear it is one of the best feelings ever. So, before we
Never
get
know.
right into the yeah, but before we get right into the Terps, obviously huge news coming from Maryland. But want to get your thoughts as a Commanders guy on Sonny Styles getting picked last night, and what you think of the Commanders draft going forward, like what you're kind of hoping for and looking for, and your expectations for their season.
Yeah, it's funny you asked. My son is an even bigger Commanders fan than me. He's, hardcore studying the roster and breaking down every draft pick. So we were just watching a bunch of video. I think it's a great pick. I mean, how long has it been since we had a star dynamic linebacker? It feels like
Yeah,
the linebackers have been very just mediocre for years. Guys, I mean, the frame is ridiculous, 6'5", 246 or whatever it is. and, has that inner safety in him, started his career as a safety. So I think it's great. Would like to have gotten a wide receiver. So I think that's a glaring need right now that hopefully they can address, because, McLaurin as your number one at this stage with little help around him is not getting it done.
Yeah. You're not a Damani Brown truther or a Luke McCaffrey truther?
I like McCaffrey, actually.
Okay.
I was pushing him on my son as a guy who could do some things, but I definitely wouldn't go on to a season relying on him to be an effective, impactful number two or number three guy.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we need some size there too.
Well, best of luck to the Commanders. I mean, I thought it was awesome when Jaden Daniels took them to the NFC Championship. I mean, it's a great fan base. They've been through a lot, So I have no problem being a Baltimore guy with, the Commanders. So props to you guys. Hoping that you kind of check off your wish list and you guys get back to contending in the NFC. So just let everybody know where they could find you on X and kind of where they can find your great work at.
Yeah, on X, I'm at Jeff_Ermann, ERMANN. And then you can find Inside MD Sports also on all the platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, if anyone's still on Facebook these days. So, yeah, we're all over the place. Encourage any Maryland fans to check out our stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. So great updates, great content. So I encourage everyone to do that as well too. So Jeff, obviously big news. We'll start with kind of the basketball front, where I tell people Maryland basketball takes years off the back of my life every possession, more so than football does. So really, really, really huge news in the portal for the Terps. I believe coming in with the number 3 overall class between incoming freshmen and transfers. And I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about all these guys. I do like the last one because anyone who can shoot threes, I'm good with, because it seems like we are always bereft of 3-point shooting talent here at Maryland. But I guess just give me your overall thoughts on it, and what your kind of expectations are for these 5 and how quickly you think they can gel, or for this team and how quickly you think they can gel.
I mean, it's a really good transfer class. It'd be hard to ask for much more. It is, it's not like a couple years ago. It doesn't have those top star, you don't have Jacoby Gillespie coming in. He wasn't established as a star necessarily on like a power conference level, but you knew he was, potentially a star player, Rodney Rice, those guys. But they got a lot of depth, a lot of size, a lot of experience. These guards they got, Bishop Boswell and DJ Wagner, have started a lot of games, been through the wars in the SEC high-level games. Obviously, in the front court, the kid Buljan, who they got from New Mexico, is a monster in the paint. Only guy in the Mountain West who averaged a double-double last year. 23-year-old grown man, which is obviously the way the sport is going these days. You have to be old and mature. We saw what Michigan did. I think their starting lineup averaged 22, 23 years old.
Yeah.
And then some nice other pieces around it. The kid, you mentioned shooting, Mike McNair from Boston University, one of the best 3-point shooters in the country. So everybody who's been rightfully screaming for Buzz to add some outside shooting, that's the guy right there. I mean, that's a guy who shot 44% on 7 attempts a game. Obviously not at the Big Ten level, but it'll translate at least to the extent that they need him, because he's not likely to be a starter. So it's a really strong class. Doesn't have the star power, but upgraded significantly in talent and size and experience across the board.
And I mean, I guess talk about the importance too of, obviously hitting the portal, but you have a guy like Baba coming in and just, especially being a local guy. I mean, do we tend to lose sight of kind of the incoming freshman class as a way to build a team? And how important do you think he's going to be the most important piece here, for this team going forward? Because he is the blue chipper that you're talking about. So just, I guess, thoughts on him and kind of where he fits in and everything.
Yeah, it's like you almost forget about him a little bit with the transfers and with how freshmen don't make, typically most of them, some do obviously. You look at these super elite guys like Boozer and DeBonsa, and those guys obviously do, but freshmen have a harder time making an impact with how old these teams are. If you talk to people at Maryland, though, they still feel like he's a lottery pick next year. They think he's that good.
Oh,
so
wow.
if he, that would be a good problem to have, losing him after 1 year, because that means that he's, I don't know if he's going to have a Derek Queen caliber year where you're the, freshman of the year over a lot of Derek Queen won freshman over the year over two guys at Rutgers who are both top 5 picks in that draft. But, if he can be even one level down from Queen, that's a huge score, because you're looking at, him at the 3, the Buljon kid, who's one of the best rebounders in the country, and then likely Pharrell Payne, assuming he gets the red shirt, which he should. That's a pretty monstrous front court. And, the backcourt has also been upgraded significantly. The big question, obviously, is who's the point guard. It seems like it'll be DJ Wagner. He's never been a full-time point guard. So that's the one glaring issue. No, I shouldn't say issue, but question mark remaining.
Well, I think one big thing too coming in is I haven't seen a ton of the teams reloading. I mean, Michigan got a couple guys, and they'll always be there because Dusty May is such a good coach. But I don't know about Illinois. They lost out on Blackwell. Wisconsin obviously lost Blackwell. Purdue was just a very senior-laden team. So I think this team, if they all play well, can be kind of top half of the Big Ten there. I think those are probably reasonable expectations, and definitely getting back to the tournament. So what do you think happened I guess I'll call it this year. What do you think happened this year? I mean, obviously we know it could be tough for transfers to come together, and then the Payne injury kind of seemed to derail them. But was it as simple as that injury and all the other injuries and guys not maybe playing out of place or not knowing their roles? Or was it, a feeling out process for Buzz, or was it just they didn't have talent?
I think the Payne injury was the final blow, but I don't think they were really going anywhere with Payne. They took a whole bunch of blowout losses even with him in the lineup. I think they just missed on a bunch of transfers. They got there late in the game. Not to say that means you can't rebuild. We saw what Bucky McMillan did at Texas A&M after, a little later than Buzz after replacing him. But it still is a challenge. And the guys they added, brought with them who they knew well, all panned out. I had Andre Mills, who looked like a star at the end of the season, Pharrell Payne, one of the better bigs in the Big Ten, and then Solomon Washington was second in the Big Ten in rebounding. So the guys that followed them from A&M were really good. The rest of the guys all washed out. None of them had a good season. And, along with Darius Adams, who struggled playing the point guard as a true freshman, a guy who had been a McDonald's All-American, didn't quite live up to that level of expectations. So, this year there's no excuses. There's no arriving late, but also they've done a really good job of adding players. Jim Smith, the AD, has done an amazing job of funding it. I'm told they've spent $14 million on the roster already, which is a huge upgrade from last year and probably puts them in, I don't know, maybe the 90th percentile overall in terms of spending. So next year, it's the expectations will be high, the talent will be way better, and it'll be interesting to see how well Buzz can bounce back.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Darius Adams, because I went to the Maryland-Georgetown game, and I was at Looney's before the game, and the people sitting next to me were very, very nice, and I started talking to them. It turns out to be Darius Adams's parents, right? And the dad was going to do his stuff, and she's like, Darius loves it here. He's going to be here for a long time. And here we are, obviously, a couple of years or a couple months later, and he's gone, but such is the nature of the business. So as much as you can, and I want to get into kind of Buzz after this, but as much as you can tell us, obviously, I don't want you to let us know the inner workings, but how's the whole process work with, do they just have lists of players? And I mean, is this going on throughout the season, and then, a game plan on, hey, we're budgeting this for this person and this for this person? How does it work, and who kind of determines everything, with the collective and partnering with the AD and Buzz? Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not in the room with them, so I can't speak to all of the processes and everything else. But I think basically, to answer your first question, yeah, they are evaluating guys during the year. Any coach at any high major school would be lying if he said they weren't at least looking at what's out there, or even, contacting through back channels. Not to say they did that, but it's very common now. There's really no such thing as tampering anymore. There's also really no such thing as the NIL, this has to be a fair marketing value. If they're just paying for play, then we're going to reject it. That's proven to be toothless on the NCAA's part. So I think Jim Smith has raised significant money this year, both through donors and alums who've been successful and want to give back, and then also some corporate deals. And, the budget has been significantly increased from what it was. Aki Collins is a name to know. He's one of the 5 assistants, but he's really served as kind of a general manager. He came from Overtime Elite, which is for those who don't know, a very high level high school. I don't even want to call it high school because it's professionalized, but
Yeah.
high school players, some of the top players in the country. So he had quite a few connections from that, and that's helped them with guys like Baba and some of these others. And they also have a consulting firm that delivers like very high level analytics of transfers and also of your own players, determining their value. And then you get to the off season, you decide who you want to keep and who you might want to keep and who you don't want to keep, and you go into negotiations just like you would in the pros. And they kept Pharrell Payne out of the portal, which was huge. He had an agent who I think preferred that he go in there, understandably, because on the open market, he's probably a $3.5 million player, and Maryland got him for significantly less than that. So, as much as we can criticize Buzz for how last season went, there's no question these players are loyal to him. Same thing with Andre Mills. I think they got a pretty good deal with him, whereas he could have gone out, on the open market too and gotten more. So he definitely builds loyalty from these guys, and it's hard to complain with the job they've done this spring.
Yeah, what a crazy year it was. I mean, I was telling people this. It's like you had 3 or 4 40-plus point performances, including seeing Diggy Coit almost break the record in just a random game against Penn State. So there were some highlight moments there, and then Mills just playing like a man possessed for basically the last month of the season, and also dropping a 40-point game. So it gave us some hope there, and it almost kind of made it even seem like what was wrong with this team. But I wanted to touch on Buzz a little bit here because I liked the hire when it came in. Obviously, I knew who he was. Very not a splashy hire, but a guy who his teams were known for defense, rebounding, scoring 50 points a game. But they're going to beat you up. They're going to hustle. They're going to be in there. And we had none of that here at Maryland. Now, obviously, Payne was a big injury, but seeing guys coming from mid-major ranks like a Calhoun who just went to Cincinnati, and I mean Dusty May coming from FAU. What is the leash like with Buzz? I mean, if they for some reason don't make the tournament this year, is it, hey, we got to cut ties because you can come in and get someone to build the program right away and not get that late start? Or are they pretty much in for him for at least 3-4 years?
I mean, I think if you don't make the tournament this year, I would expect them to make a move. That might sound crazy. 2 years is a very short window. You're talking about very, I think about $20 million still you'd have to pay to buy him out, or 15. I'd have to look it back up. But I think that they quite honestly would move on based on what I've heard. You're looking at a program that has a very rich basketball history, is unlike virtually all of its peers, in that the fans are more interested in basketball than they are in football. And so you've missed the tournament 3 of the past 5 years. If that extended to 4 of 6 years, and Xfinity, we saw how barren it was there during some of these late season games. There was nobody there. So I think just from a business management standpoint and a customer retention, so to speak, you would have no choice but to make a move. And like you said, Maryland hasn't gone that route with the young up and comers at all in the recent hires, but it would definitely, whenever the next hire is, whether it's next year or 5 years ago or 5 years from now, they might be well suited to give that a try, because that's usually the lottery ticket.
Yeah, I was a big Kim English guy, and he obviously got let go from Providence. I don't know if I would want to give him a shot, but a guy like Tony Skinn, who, was having a lot of success at Mason, I think a lot of Terps fans will be banging the drum for him when he comes in. So I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm a Buzz fan. I'm happy with what he did, but at the same time, Maryland expects to be at the top of the Big Ten as fans. That's what we're used to. I mean, being relevant with Gary Williams in the ACC, all those Sweet 16s, to see what that team with Willard did, where had they not played Florida, I think, this could have possibly been the Final Four team, or at least, the Elite Eight. And they led Florida with it into the second half at some point before the doors fell off. But you're exactly right. So I'm glad, kind of given the Loxley thing, which we'll touch base on, that they are willing to pull that plug early and not kind of settle for mediocrity in there. So definitely like that. Want to touch base, I guess, on football a little bit here. Obviously, I think I don't know if it's the spring game, but there's like a spring festival or something, maybe a practice or whatever. But just initial reports from you and thoughts on, like, any big news or buzz or players that, you're hearing good stuff about. in camp so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's very predictable that I'm going to say this, but they say Malik Washington looks amazing, looks like a different guy this year. Obviously, new offensive coordinator, Clint Trickett, who, I think has made him a little more comfortable. The system last year really didn't work well. He had no running game to lean on. When you're a true freshman quarterback trying to start in the Big Ten and have no running game to help you out, that's a recipe for disaster, which is exactly what happened, obviously. So, they say he's taken the next step forward with the talent he has. It's not hard to believe. The offensive line they feel like has improved some. Obviously, that's a see it to believe it kind of scenario after the past couple of years. Blocked pretty well in the passing game last year, but the run blocking was atrocious. So that's going to be the biggest thing I think that we focus on going into the season, because I think the defense, based on the personnel and based on things I've heard from spring and just the overall talent level that was, primarily the guys in last year's freshman class who they kind of built things around and let them just jump right into the fire last year. I think the defense could be one of their best in quite a while.
Yeah, and this is the frustrating part in the kind of Loxley tenure for me. It's because Maryland puts talent into. You see Maryland players getting drafted and littering rosters, and it's like for a school like Maryland that hasn't competed like for a national title, they were putting more people in than Michigan, over the last decade before Michigan got really good, and other schools like that. So the talent is there, and I mean we're in a obviously hotbed of high school football here. So, kind of looking at the schedule here, obviously the big game coming in at home to start kind of the season. No disrespect to Hampton, but is James Franklin coming back into town? Virginia Tech, a team that travels well. Are they doing anything to try to get more Maryland fans to the stadium and games? Because we know Virginia Tech travels well. They play Wisconsin later, who travels well. Penn State, who travels really well. And we don't want that to be a 50-50 ratio or even 60-40 for the opposing team. So have you heard of anything that they might be doing to try to get more fans out there besides just winning games?
Yeah, that's Jim Smith's number one expertise. That's what he did with the Braves. He created a lot of different fan options, seating options, food packages, family friendly experiences, and he's done the same thing at Maryland. They have this family kid friendly event outside the stadium for every game. They've put together some a family seating section, for those who don't want their kids to be hearing Marco yell that you suck or whatever it might be. And they also have done some deals, season tickets, to really provide a lot of value. So that's Jim Smith's wheelhouse. Obviously, you can only do so much marketing if the team is not playing well. It's still hard to get people out. It comes down to winning, obviously, but they have done a lot with that, and I think you'll see some progress in terms of not seeing the stadium half filled with opposing fans. But until you can get that one like marquee win over a name team to get fans back on the bandwagon, it's still always going to be a challenge to fill the place with Maryland fans.
Yeah, so much like we talked about with Buzz, and I'm kind of going over the schedule here. So there's a stretch of Virginia Tech, UCLA, Nebraska, Ohio State. If they lose those games, is Loxley gone by then? I mean, or is it, hey, he's going to go through the year regardless, or do you see possibly a change in season?
Yeah, I have a very hard time imagining them firing him heading into the season. They've made a commitment to him and these young players that he's brought along that, this is the year where they're going to make a breakthrough. The players are very closely tied to him. I mean, if you had a disaster scenario where you started, 1-6 or something, maybe, but
yeah.
Otherwise, no. I think he'll coach it out through the season, and if he gets, no one knows what the magic benchmark is, whether that's 7 wins or it depends on who the wins are. Obviously, we've seen some 7 and 8 win seasons that didn't include any big scalps that they took. So he'll make it through the season, but they've got to win. They've got to do some things that they haven't done in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and that's very interesting too. And I know we touched about that like on the show rundown because I was curious to ask you that. So the expectations between football and basketball are night and day, but the money is still being allocated to football. They gave him a higher NIL budget, bring him back and said, hey, go win. But what does that winning consist of? Because with that schedule that I just read out, I mean, if you lose to like Ohio State, if you lose to Penn State, maybe at USC, I mean, you can still have a good year and be 8-4, 7-5. but is that good enough given the increased NIL budget and the talent that they have on this team? Like, what do you think they would need? Like, I mean, is it like, okay, we just looked good? I mean, eye test kind of stuff, or I guess what are your thoughts on it? Because I'm torn. Like, I wouldn't consider 7-5 successful, but I'm not the one handing out the money. So, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
that is the $1 million question. What does he have to do? I think if you get to 8 wins, regardless of who they are, there's probably going to be some decent ones in there. You're back for sure. 7, probably in solid shape, but it depends who the wins are. You can't just stack the empty calorie wins and lose to all the big dogs. You need that one, like I said, that one marquee win. So, I'm thinking in that 7 to 8 win range, but it's a sliding scale depending on who the wins come against.
And what are your predictions for the team overall? And do you think Locks is back as Terps head coach next year?
Yeah, I think they'll win. I think they could win 7. It's really hard to say. You got the new offensive coordinator. You're relying on a freshman quarterback who had a lot of ups and downs last year. So is he going to be similar to that guy and maybe a little better? Or is he going to be a legit, top half of the Big Ten caliber starting quarterback? I think the defense is a lot more loaded than people realize. And, obviously not to say they weren't motivated before, but this is backs against the wall, save your job, try to get an extension kind of year. And so I think he will. I think the talent in that class from last year, people don't realize, I think is maybe the most talented recruiting class Maryland's had in 20-ish years since those teams that Friedgen had with some of those star players back then. So I think we will, but, obviously you can't bet on it at this point. You have back-to-back 4-win seasons, 1-8 in the Big Ten both years. So it would be hard to feel confident about a big prediction of success.
And I think it's, part of the frustrating part for me and some other fans, there's a lot more diehard Maryland football fans than myself out there, but seeing the way that they're losing games, I mean, I think it was the Washington game where they just looked unbelievable, and then fourth quarter collapse, turnovers. Now I know the coach can't control the turnovers, but 3 or 4 kind of losses like that where it's like, what if like we kind of had that game and 2 of those go your way? You're sitting there kind of 6 wins bowl eligible. So that I think would kind of have to change. And I mean, you could have all the talent in the world, and if Locks doesn't improve in that area, now maybe another year of having a quarterback that is good and another year older will kind of help with that. So I'm kind of right there with you. I think it could be 7-5, 8-4. Obviously, would be ecstatic with anything more. So before we wrap up here, I didn't send you this question, but I've been a Anthony Cowan jersey number in the rafters proponent for years. Any thoughts on my boy Cowan? Any talk of him getting in there? Mello Trimble? Anyone else that might be having their number up there?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything lately, Marco. Is the funny part on that is, about, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, I had heard from someone close to Damon Evans that Evans was pushing to get Cowan in the rafters and it was going to happen. And then, of course, he leaves. So, I haven't heard of any movement there. That's something that would be worth asking around for some summertime fodder. But I think he deserves it. I think Mello deserves it. We've had the debate a bunch about who should go first. To me, I think Mello, just because he really saved the program from going down the tubes. 3 straight years missing the tournament. They were totally off the national radar. He comes in with Des Wells and turns things around. Cowan had an unbelievable career himself. It's hard to compare guys who played a different number of years. Obviously, that's always a challenge. But the program had been steadied by then. He had Bruno Fernando and Kevin Herter and all these other guys. He had a little more, Jalen Smith. So he had a little more support. But to me, I feel like they're both worthy. But it's always a strange thing. Steve Francis is up there for 1 year, and then you have these guys, obviously, who aren't. And so, that's a good question, though. I'll have to dig into that one.
Yeah, it reminded me like during the NCAA tournament, they had the What If 2020 NCAA tournament. Part of me was like, man, I wish we had it because we were so good that year. But being a Maryland fan, I also kind of had the realization with maybe we should just have the tournament, got upset in the second round. So I'm not wondering what if, you know what I mean? But that team was really incredible. And it was, I mean, to think back just 5 years ago, it's like we share the regular season title 6 years ago now, share the regular season title with number 3 seed, and to come across the worst season in NCAA or in school history. I mean, that just kind of shows how it's fallen to more to your point where Buzz needs to get it correct ASAP.
Yeah, that's one of the all-time what ifs right there, because they had the
Mhm.
potential, but they were also sputtering a little bit down the stretch, and Turgeon had really struggled to break through in the postseason. So that's top five. There's another article I need to write. Top five all-time what ifs. That's definitely on
Yeah.
the list.
Well, I know Derek Queen will never have to pay for a meal or an adult beverage in College Park for the rest of his career after that shot that he hit, and they could put his number up in the rafters just for that, and I don't think any person would mind. But Jeff, great stuff as always. Give your site a plug again, and
Yeah.
talk about maybe anything you got going on, any articles or anything.
Site is InsideMDSports.com. We're on the 24 Sports/CBS Sports Network. Cover the teams, recruiting all day, every day. So if that's your thing, you should come check us out.
And what is the membership fee?
So it depends, annual and monthly. We actually have a deal right now, though. For annual subscribers, you get 50% off your first year, so which turns out to be like, I think, $4.57 a month.
Oh wow, okay. And that includes text messages, a bunch of different stuff, right? It's great and it's very user friendly as well.
Yeah, and we have the largest community of Maryland fans on our Inside Scoop message board, which is Terps fans talking all day long about every Maryland topic you could think of. Text alerts, like you said, when there's news, and if there's a story brewing, we usually have the inside info on it as it develops.
Well, Jeff, great stuff. Really looking forward to. I'm a basketball guy, but hopefully Maryland football can give us some good moments this year, kind of leading into a great basketball. Oh, and why don't we? Before we sign off, do we want to give the women a plug because they just had a big transfer too, right? Brenda Fries and her team, and I know Addie Mack's coming back, but anything about the transfer that just came in?
It was actually a high school recruit, Trinity
Okay.
Jones. I believe she's ranked the number 7 player in the country, 5-star. So she's the second 5-star in this class for Brenda Fries, along with Jordan Jackson, DC native, who's also, a big time blue chip recruit. So, they have a lot of turnover in that program. A lot of players leave, but they reload every year like clockwork. She's one of the top recruiters in the game. And the question with them is, can you get back to that level where you're not only really good in the Big Ten, but also, competing for Final Fours and things like that?
Yeah, I think it'll be promising based on what you're telling me and everything like that. And I know Brenda Fries does not take too kindly to second round exits in the NCAA tournament, so I'm sure she'll do her damnedest to get back. But we'll love to see Maryland win back in there. When Christy Tolliver, Jade, and the girl from Duke's Eye to send them to the Final Four, maybe that was in the Final Four. I remember standing up in my apartment. I'm like, this is a women's basketball game, and I'm just going nuts. So it's like, to see that happen was awesome. And they've been, the model of consistency, like you said. So shout out to the Maryland women. Sorry we didn't kind of touch base on it a little bit beforehand, but Jeff, great stuff as always, and we'll have to do this again sometime, either during football season or right before basketball.
Anytime, Marco.
Go Terps. Awesome. Let me end the live here. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, man.